Once again, adjusting volume before getting into the review proper. So, back on schedule. I'm doing a movie review, and then I'll get back to doing covers on Mondays and the review stuff on Fridays. I'm not sure what what album I'm gonna review next. I'm gonna try to do more contemporary stuff and do the classic rock stuff sparingly, but it is what it is. So this is a movie that I can't remember if I've talked about this film before, but I remember I talked about it with a group of friends. And since I've been noticing on Twitter that this film recently hit its 26th anniversary, I am going to review the Jim Carrey classic, The Mask. Plus, another reason is that the movie came out in '94, and I was born in '94, so there's that. Usually, I would like to get this out of the way. I'm usually it's a Jim Carrey vehicle, and this is probably one of the few ones I've seen. I've seen three of his movies. I liked this. I liked Sonic, but he was not necessarily the main protagonist. I mean, he was the villain. The only other movie I've seen of Jim Carrey in was Dumb and Dumber. And while there were some humorous jokes in the movie, most of it revolved around Jim Carrey being a cartoony dumbass. Which, I mean, okay, the movie's called Dumb and Dumber, so I get that that's the point, but um, that was kind of the movie that really started me down the path of not being a huge fan of Jim Carrey's comedy. Because I feel like his type of comedy where he acts like a cartoon character, in my opinion, if you can act goofy and over the top as a live action performer, usually the jokes would be funnier. The problem is that sometimes with Jim Carrey, his comedy can be so obnoxious. It's like he's mugging the camera to the point where the camera would be beaten and bloodied in an alleyway, barely breathing. That's how much he mugs the camera, and usually, and that can kind of be a little too much in your face. But in this movie, it works perfectly because he plays this kind of hapless banker who gets pushed around by a lot of people and just is sick of being taken for granted. So when he finds this mask and it turns him into the goofy alter ego he wishes he could be, it makes a lot of sense. And I think Jim Carrey was perfect for this role. Maybe if this movie had come out in like the mid to late '70s, maybe they could have gotten Robin Williams, but that wouldn't have made sense because this is based off a comic book that came out in the late '80s, early '90s. And the comic is much more violent and dark and disturbing than this movie, which is more of a lighthearted comedy. Um, so I basically gave away the story that Jim Carrey plays this likable banker who wants to get the girl, wants to be taken seriously, and yet people kind of they realize that his character Stanley Ipkiss is a nice guy, and they routinely give him the shaft to take advantage of it. I mean, and again, right off the bat, this is very relatable because I think a lot of us nice guys, myself included, have been in situations where you do the right thing, you act nice, and you get very diminishing returns as a result of your good deed. So that's very relatable. And I think everyone else has also been in that situation where they've been pushed around and like in grade school, you had that one bully that would always trip you or make fun of you. You kind of wish you could turn around and roundhouse punch that guy to the face, you know? And I would say Jim Carrey as Ipkiss is good. I mean, when he's the mask, it's kind of like a more juvenile teenage Robin Williams from Aladdin kind of thing. It is a lot of fun. It's very zany. There's a lot of great energy. And I also like the fact that the relationship he has with Cameron Diaz's character in her film debut, we don't really, even when Ipkiss is himself and when Ipkiss is the mask, there is still good chemistry between the two leads because essentially they're two different characters. I mean, technically it's the same guy, but the personalities are widely different. So it's almost like a completely different character, really. Um, the visual effects of the movie, considering the fact that this was still very early on with CG being used throughout the bulk of a movie, because I mean, in the '90s we'd had Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, but the CGI, even though it looks a little fake now, it still looks really good, and the graphics look like a video game that would have been way ahead of its time compared to what was coming out in the 90s at that point. So I think it was very well done. And also, the majority of almost every joke in here is really funny. You know, there's a lot of good scenes, like the bit where the mask gets everybody, all the cops, to dance in front of the Central Park stand-in when they're trying to arrest him, and all the cops start dancing around and do a Congo line. That was pretty funny. I loved the bit at the beginning where he used the balloon animals and got a Tommy gun out and started shooting at the criminals. Those were two of the funny scenes that I can remember. Um, I think if I had to give a fault with the movie, I really don't think I could. It's one of those films where it's a genuinely funny comedy. The characters are likable. The effects are pretty well done. And the moral at the end about trying to be yourself and trying not to, and don't try to be something you're not. It's one of those lessons that you see in a lot of movies, but the whole moral of being yourself and people will eventually accept you and reward you for being true to yourself. That's one of those lessons that I think is always going to have movies made about it, because it's something that is going to stay true for eternity. It's one of those timeless lessons that will always be relevant no matter what year or what decade. I definitely think that this is definitely this was at a time when Jim Carrey was just exploding in popularity, and this movie, as well as like Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber. These three films essentially catapulted Jim Carrey's career. I'm not sure if I'll review any of Carrey's other films. I mean, maybe The Grinch around Christmas time. I'm not sure, but overall, for the first Jim Carrey movie I'm reviewing, where he's the main protagonist, this was really good. And the other Jim Carrey movie I saw, Sonic, that was also very good. And it was kind of cool to see Jim Carrey be the villainous version of Lloyd Christmas in Sonic. But overall, wonderful film. I would definitely recommend watching it. Even if you're not a Jim Carrey fan, I would still say give this one a chance, because you'll probably enjoy it anyway. So that's my review. I'm sorry that this was less than 8 minutes, but you know something? I'll see you guys next time, and I'll post my cover on Monday for you. Take care.